To everybody here in the room, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for taking your time, spending your time, and paying attention. For those who are watching online, I want to introduce myself. I'm Father Louis Powell. I am the pastor of St. Michael's Church in San Clemente. The link to the church and other things will be in the notes. In these sessions, we are focused on leadership, particularly what it means for Christians to be leaders at home, at work, and in the church. Previously, we have discussed our call as Christians to leadership. First, we are created in God's image, and second, Jesus at his ascension has given us a commission to go out into the world, to create disciples, to baptize, and to teach. So we all have a call to leadership. We also talked about those qualities in ourselves that we should aspire to as Christian leaders, and we talked about those traits that we exhibit to the world, the way people look and see us. Now today, we're going to focus on the process of leadership. And the process of leadership may seem a little mundane, but it is an important element as we build and build and build as what it is to be a Christian leader. I have looked and seen different places out there talking about leadership and Christian leadership, and one of the claims I've heard made is that Christian leadership is different than secular leadership. And I say, no, that's not true. Leadership is leadership, and it is either good or it is bad. And that Christian leadership is, because this is a universe created by our God, Christian leadership is better. So that's part of the premise and the background of this. And then at this point, as we're talking about things that are more mundane, the process of leadership, the steps that you take are still important, that we should exhibit excellence. So as we begin this, let me just call out these processes of leadership, and I'm going to talk about it in two sets. And the first step are those things that are the ordered steps that we take through an effort that we're accomplishing, a project, something that we're doing. And these steps are to plan, to organize, to coordinate, and to conclude. There are other processes that we're engaged in an almost continuous effort throughout the work that we're doing. And the first one is to communicate. And the second is to solve problems and adapt. Those are the ongoing processes that we go as we go through the steps. Now, and I'll highlight, planning is about defining the objectives that are necessary to success. The objectives, the activities, and the priorities. To organize is to deal with the people and the places, the tasks, and the timeline. The third, to coordinate, those are the actions. We'll get into this. Coordinating is the ongoing step of monitoring and making sure everything is still on track. That's the doing, during the doing. And then concluding is about getting to the end, knowing you're there and celebrating. So let's talk first about planning. The idea of planning is that you are writing the future. Think about that. You are writing the future. You are attending to ideas. Ideas of what is your long-term strategy and what are the immediate tactics you have to employ to achieve your immediate, middle range, and long-term goals. A key to your planning is to clearly articulate well-defined goals. Here's a question that you have to ask at the beginning stage, the planning stage, is how will you know when you're done? It's an interesting question, right? That you have to know the answer. Otherwise, you get caught in this endless loop, and you don't want to get caught in an endless loop. What does it look like when you're done? You have to know that to plan how you're going to get there. Another crucial part of planning is to associate these goals with a clear and achievable timeline. You have to have a clear and achievable timeline. There's a saying you need to keep in mind right now, and that is always have a contingency plan. Always have a contingency plan. There's a backstory to this. It's true. Always have a contingency plan. And I'm almost reluctant to mention that I have actually seen the movie Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Oh my gosh.
I actually saw it and enjoyed it and drew from it this conclusion: you should always have a contingency plan. I provide no other endorsement of that movie or any of its other ideas. Always have a contingency plan. Always have a contingency plan. And always follow up. The key here is you do need to spend the time to plan. You need to spend the time to plan. If you just do. Otherwise, you're dealing with chaos and haphazardness. If you don't define the direction you're going, then you're going to wander in the wilderness. If you don't know where you're going, you will not get there. And it takes time. You have to take time out to think. Like I said, it is dealing in the realm of ideas in order to write the future. Things that you look for during planning. First one is cost versus quality. And that I kind of leave generalized because that's the sort of thing you're going to have to kind of figure out yourself. Is this effort worth it on the journey toward this end goal? The next thing you do that you look for are going to be, nope, am I out of space here? I'm going to pause here for a second because things you look for is out of order. There we go. Missing page. There we go. Sorry, we're going to fix the recording. We can't fix the lecture. Okay. As we were saying, you need to spend the time needed to plan before you move to action. Another part of planning is that you have to do long-term planning. Any kind of planning you're doing for the things right in front of you have to fit in with where your long-term objectives are. You're on a journey, you're going to a destination. What you're doing now has to get you there then. And this is what we think about when we think of a long-term strategy. And involved in this process, you have forecasting steps. You have to put people and budgets and activities on a calendar. You have to, understand this difference, right? You have to, as you're planning, consider what your future decisions will be. Because there's things you will need to decide in the future, not now. So there will be future decisions. What are those? And then there's also the future of current decisions. When you decide this now, where will it be in the future? That is a part of thinking through your long-term strategy. There is another part of this, too, in the planning phase, as you're balancing all of these decisions, plotting out on the calendar the things you're doing, is that you will be choosing the right risks. Nothing is without risk. And so you're going to have to differentiate between one and another, and you're going to get credit or blame based on how well you pick. Next, I want to talk about organizing. What are you doing when you are organizing? You are arranging all the things. It is answering the question, who does what, where, and when? It includes both the immediate plans and organization you have and the long-term organization that you have. Immediately, you have to organize things for your day-to-day execution of the tasks. You have to keep the projects that are on your plate at the moment on track. How are you going to organize so that things move? Long term, you have to take those day-to-day activities and the organizing for the immediate goals to bring you to those long-term objectives you're trying to reach. Your strategy, affecting your strategy and moving organizationally in that direction. You are, in your immediate planning, preparing for the success of your long-range goals, your long-range plans. And, very crucial, you are managing your staffing arrangements for, I'm going to call them two different things. One, you're managing your staffing arrangements for durability, that it's a sustainable, meaningful work that you're doing, and that it also has this second element, is that it is for the good of all those involved. When you are organizing, you want to care for the people that are doing the work. You want to care for the people that are receiving the product of your work. When you are organizing your projects, you are implementing plans. It includes these things. You are assigning roles, responsibilities, and standards. And I want to talk about delegating right now. I have mentioned in the past that delegating itself, it is something worthy of its own course. It is a complex skill that takes a lot of attention and consideration to figure out how to do it really well. But in this case, I want to touch on delegating as it has to do with, first, with responsibility and authority. When you delegate to someone, you are giving them a responsibility. And it has to be clear. They are carrying a responsibility. And if they're going to be successful in executing a responsibility, then they have to be given authority. When you are in a leadership position and you assign someone to a task, then everybody involved has to know that they have the authority to execute that task. Decision-making, whatever it takes to work toward that end result that you've delegated to them, they have the responsibility for it, and they have the authority to do it. But there is another element of leadership that you can't give away. And that is accountability. As the leader, you are always accountable. Even if you delegate to someone, you can't just say, I handed the job to this other person and they failed. No, it's your failure. But in respect to delegating, as I said, you can delegate responsibility and you can delegate authority, but you can't delegate accountability. You can share it. You can share that accountability. The person that you delegate to is accountable to you, as you are accountable to the organization. You can share it, but you can't give it away. When you're organizing, too, on a next topic, I want to say there is a responsibility in your organizing to train those that are doing the tasks, that you need to build competence in the people that are doing the work rather than assuming competence. It's better to build it than to assume it. So build competence by training those people around you. You also have to, as a part of organizing, establish procedures that measure how you're doing. Procedures to measure performance. You have to have a plan. You have to organize to know whether you're succeeding or not. And a key part of organizing also is that you have to care for the health of the relationships that you have. A very important part of leadership is caring for the relationships that you have with the people around you. And that is an element of your organizing. You want to organize so that the people around you can be successful, that they can have the skills and the competence that enable them to succeed, and that you don't wipe out their life on the way. And here's a good one for organizing. You have to provide the means to give and receive feedback. You have to build into your organization a way for the people around you to give you the news you need to be successful, and also for you to be able to give the people around you feedback. You're both going to have to keep these two-way communication channels open and healthy. Now I want to move on to the step of coordinating. This is the world you live in through the life of the doing of the project. You are managing people and time. One of the most important things you will do during this step in a process is to keep your actions aimed at the target. To keep your actions aimed at the target. You pay orderly, rational, and conscious attention in order to keep things aimed at the target. Now, in this working out of this step, there are a couple of ways that this happens. One of them, you have to build in a systematic way these coordinating steps. And the built-in plan steps need to be systematic. The routine, ordinary actions that allow you to continue to coordinate on a daily, weekly, monthly, recurring basis. But there's another kind of action that you take that is impromptu. These actions, items, questions come to you, and they come on a, what do we call this, asymmetrical way. They're not scheduled. They're the interruptions that you have to deal with. And that is also a part of leading through the coordinating step. In a plan coordination step, you do things like you are monitoring the milestones, monitoring your progress toward defined objectives. You have the end goal and you have the intermediate goals, and are you hitting those milestones on time and at what sacrifice? You have to monitor the techniques and the methods that people are using. How are people doing the work that you've asked them to do? are they doing them well? Are they optimized in how they do them? Now, take a moment here, because when I talk about optimization and I talk about efficiency, I don't see that as a overarching goal. And the reason is because when I look at God's creation, I see that he is not very efficient. He is not efficient at all. There are a lot of acorns. There are very few trees. What are those, oak trees that make acorns? There's a lot more seeds than there are plants that grow from them. There is an abundance, a superabundance of those things. So efficiency isn't necessarily optimum. How does life abundant work out in the way you do things? But as you're monitoring techniques and methods, you want to care for the whole space that you're in, the people and the things. Are they using methods that are bringing harm to the people or the process or something like that? Or are they getting the work done well? You know, in a crazy world, getting the work done well in an environment that people are happy to be in and are proud of what they are working toward. And that's not efficient, that's abundant. You also have to monitor the organizational health, monitoring organizational health. And I'm going to tell you the catchphrase that always comes to my mind in this, and that comes from in the way back machine when I was a junior lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and I was deployed on this ship over into the Western Pacific. I was a part of an artillery platoon. And so you had the platoon commander, who was the senior officer, and all of the people that shot the guns were involved in that. And then you had me, and I was a fire direction officer, and I had the people with the radios and the slide rules that pointed the guns. And we're on this ship, and the guy that was the senior guy, a very good friend of mine, learned a lot from him. Every day he would look at me and go, "It's time to pet the troops. It's time to pet the troops." And we would. We'd jump up and we'd go down to wherever there was a quarters, the space where the troops lived on the ship, and we'd go down and we'd just talk to people. You just spend time with people. The guy was brilliant. He was an outstanding leader. So it is necessary when we're talking about managing the health of your organization to spend the time interacting, having those conversations with the people that you work with, the people that work with you as a part of a team, the people around you, your peers, your seniors, all that stuff. Spending the time to talk, to take the temperature, to see how things are going. Those are all managing the health of your organization. And when you're coordinating things, that's important. That's important. Those are the ideas around the things that you plan. These are the things that you plan while you're coordinating. But these impromptu things that come at you, this is a more creative part of leadership. There is an art and a creativity to leadership, very much a part of this action that will always happen with you. Something will come your way. There is a very famous military dictum, principle, idea that says no plan survives first contact with the enemy. I've read a lot of military history in different areas, and it is something that always proves itself to be true. When you begin and when you engage, when the work starts to happen, your plans will have to adapt. They will have to change. Your goals don't, but how you get there will be impacted to some degree, one way or another. And there's a couple of things that you're going to be engaged in. And one of those is going to be problem solving. How do you solve the problem? Sometimes the problems are things that break, things that are unexpected, or sometimes it's the circumstances themselves that change. A key part of this impromptu coordinating process is making decisions. Making decisions. Making decisions is important and not always intuitive. It is a characteristic of leadership that you need to constantly develop to improve. Being able to make clear and timely decisions is important to your success. Also, a part of this impromptu coordinating that you do is a necessity for you to have both technical skills and people skills. I think that every job of leadership that you're in is in a particular field of something or other, and that the work that you're doing is particular to that subject area. And the better you understand that field, the easier it will be for you to be successful in dealing with the impromptu things that come up, that come your way, technical skills. But as we know, leadership is predominantly involved with people. So you have to have not only the technical skills for the job, you have to have people skills. How do you deal with people? There's a lot of general principles that go into how to deal with people, but you're not dealing with the generic human being. You're dealing with particular people. So you have to have skills not around generally being able to work with a person, but having the skills to deal with this person or that person. That's why we spent so much time talking about the characteristics that we want in us and the traits that we want to exhibit to others, the caring, attention, all those things that go into people skills. And you bring those together in order to make the work you're doing successful. I'm going to tell you another story. This one is more current, and it had to do with one of my most recent work efforts. I worked in an IT area, and when I was just a worker bee and when I was a manager, this function happened a lot. But when I was a manager, it became quite a habit that I would be in my office, and one of my friends that I worked with would come by and say, I have this problem. This is what's happening, and I have no solution. And so I would stand up and say, well, walk with me, because the people that we worked with, all the different divisions and groups, they were all on the same floor. They were all there. This is what I mean by impromptu. The problem comes to your door, and I'd stand up and I'd walk around and go, let's talk to this person, and let's talk to that person. Let's talk to the people that are engaged in this roadblock we're trying to solve. And you know how office buildings are constructed. It's like a loop. We would make the loop all the way around, and when we got back to his chair where he sat, he would say, thanks, because the problem was solved. It was a walk around. And that became such a habit between us that he started calling me the easy button. So that's a part of leadership that you want to have going for you. And this is where I want to talk to you. When you're dealing with this, here are the things that you're looking for when you're coordinating. Cost versus quality. Is the work you're doing worth the effort? Is the work you're doing worth the effort? And that is, you're going to have to get a sense of that. Other thing you're looking for are bottlenecks. Where in the process is the work piling up? waiting for something. That's a bottleneck. How do you solve that bottleneck so that everything flows in a good way? Because when you have bottlenecks and things get stopped up, people become unhappy. And then things begin to break down. So find the bottlenecks and fix them. Another thing you're going to learn is how well is your forecasting. You want to improve your forecasting. What did you anticipate that didn't happen? What did you not anticipate that did? How well are you in forecasting how long it takes to do a thing? How well are you at forecasting how much the thing will cost? There is a constant analysis that you want to do as you're looking there in order to measure and improve your forecasting accuracy. Another thing you're looking for is drift. Remember when I said at the beginning of your coordinating efforts is about keeping all of your activities aimed at the target. Drift is what happens over time when you start drifting off towards some other target that's not yours. And that is an ongoing, everyday process. That's like an internal review. How are we doing internally on this team? Are we staying on target? You also need to be paying attention to what's happening outside and around. The goals that you planned, the direction you were going, is it true today? Is it still valid? Or do you need to adapt? And that is looking outside. That is looking outside. And another thing you need to pay attention to, and thinking a little bit back on those technical skills and people skills you have, is that are there new methods or new technology out there that applies to what you're doing? Now, everything new isn't better. Everything new isn't better, and any change from old to new has a price. So when you're looking around at new methods and new technology, there is an evaluation that you need to make about whether this change is worth making. The rule is, if it's better, make the change. And if it's not, don't. The last of these planned process steps that I'm going to talk about is concluding. That gets left off the process a lot, but it shouldn't. It's a bigger step than you imagine. The most important thing I think you need to do when you get to the end of something is to celebrate the win. If you're done, something went well, and you should enjoy that. If you're going to do that, that's why when you begin at planning saying, this is what done looks like. So that when you conclude the project, you can say, hooray, we have achieved the thing that looks like done. We can celebrate the win. There is an important process in this. You have to give credit away. You have to give credit to where it's due. You give the credit, especially to those people you've asked to do something. You want to call them out and appreciate their success. You have to, when you're done, have feedback time to give and take and find out what went well and what didn't go well. And getting to end is the journey, and we've talked about all these things that can happen. You need to be able to pull out those things that didn't work so that you can fix them. You fix what's broken. And you want to call out those things that worked really well. I am known in some areas as somebody willing to experiment, to try things, to just leave the map and see what happens. There's sometimes you discover great things, and those things you want to repeat. You might also break something, in which case you never want to do that again. And sadly, in every project, every work effort you have, there will be paperwork. Part of getting to done, part of celebrating the win is to file the paperwork, whatever that might be. So as you work through every effort that you do, as you achieve those immediate, middle, long-term plans, celebrate the win, file the paperwork. Now I want to turn our attention toward the impromptu processes in leadership. And the first one is communicating. When we are communicating, we are sharing ourselves. We are sharing ourselves. We will spend a lot more time in the next session. The next session is about leadership and communication. But there are some things that I want to talk about now with respect to communicating as a leader during the process of the work of leadership. And the first rule of communicating is to listen. And I always say, listen, stop talking. Stop talking is a crucial element of listening. And in that listening, it is necessary that your humility be sincere, right? I'm presupposing humility in listening, but it needs to be sincere. Asking questions is a challenge. And I would say it's a skill that most people do not have. Most people do not have the skill to ask questions. So you need to learn to ask the kind of questions that help you to gain understanding. Ask questions to help you gain understanding. And I always use this example. I have had people many times ask me the question, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? And at no time in my history has anyone been interested in the answer that I gave. There's kind of I miss some social cues sometimes. And when people ask, what were you thinking? They don't really want an answer to that. But I would miss that step and I would start explaining. But the question, what were you thinking, was not really a question. It was an accusation that I had failed to think properly. Most of the time, the questions people ask are a way to make an accusation and still pretend to be a good person. You don't have the courage to make the accusation, and so you ask a question. What were you thinking? Don't ask those kind of questions. Learn to ask questions that help you to gain understanding. I guess theoretically, at least, asking the question, what were you thinking, could help you gain understanding. But my experience has been no one was interested. No one was interested in that. A very important element of communicating is to always praise in public. You praise in public and you do any necessary corrections in private. You praise in public because you not only want the person you're praising to know that you appreciate the good that they've done, is you want everybody around them to appreciate the good that they've done, and you want everybody around them to want to do that kind of good and get that kind of praise. You want to know giving credit where credit is due is praising in public. You want to do your best to always say the good about others. I'm talking about leadership here. You want to focus on or develop the ability to only say the good about others. And otherwise, to not say anything. Now, there is an element of honesty that you need to maintain as well, integrity. And it's complicated. Focus on the good, especially in public. And when there are times where corrective kind of feedback is necessary, you want to keep that personal and private. That gives people that you're working with an opportunity to maybe explain what happened or provide corrections to what happened. When a person is corrected and they make an effort to do better, then you want the people outside the room to recognize the doing better and not to be hung up on the correction. Timely and honest. You want to build an atmosphere where you can receive bad news. It is notorious with respect to the Soviet Union. Maybe some of you remember Stalin. Stalin was not good at receiving bad news. The people that brought him bad news disappeared in unpleasant circumstances, and so, as a result, no one brought him bad news. No one brought him the truth. And so he lived in a fantasy world where everything was great. And the problem with that is that reality is relentless and merciless. Reality will destroy your illusions. And as a leader, you need to know the bad news. You need to know where the trouble is. You do not want to live in the dark. And to do that, when you're communicating, you have to build that platform, that means, that habit, where people can bring you bad news. And that means you want to build strong, mutually beneficial relationships with others. And the way you do that is by having frequent, open communications. Always talking, always open. Walking around and talking to your people. Pet the troops, if you will. You want to see people, you want to talk to people, you want to hear what they have to say. That kind of open communications keeps you fully aware, helps you to pay the attention that you need to pay. And crucial here, let me say, a huge part of communicating is to minimize surprises. In work, surprises are almost always bad. And nobody likes surprises. And this is a two-way street. The people that you're working with on these work, they don't want you to surprise them. They don't want you to surprise them. And at the same time, you don't want them to withhold things from you that will surprise you. When your boss calls and says, "What were you thinking?" or "Why is this thing happening?" you don't want to be surprised. You don't want him to know or her to know before you do. And that means the people that work with you have to keep you well informed. And like I said, it's a two-way street. You work so that the people who work with you are not surprised. The people who work with you keep you up to date so that you're not surprised. Next, I want to talk about this ongoing, impromptu process of leadership that is adapting. And adapting is a creative art. It is the skill of innovating on the fly. It is you as the leader who is an artist or an adventurer. An artist or an adventurer. I'm going to call out three things. You adapt to changing circumstances, you solve problems by discovering new ways, and you learn from mistakes. Adapting to changing circumstances. You have to listen well to those around you. You have to make things that are unknown known. And you have to find ways to say yes. Adapting is that detective work, right? Making the unknown known is that you have to be able to figure out what really is happening. How does this work? How do I adapt? That's Sherlock Holmes. That's detective work. And this finding ways to say yes. God willing, you'll be working with a group of people that are intelligent, creative, goodwill. And you know what? They're going to find a solution sometimes before you do. Hopefully, frequently before you do. So you want to be able to find a way to say yes. You want the people around you to present, own, and execute solutions. It's a lot easier than trying to do it all yourself. Find ways to say yes. Solving problems. Solving problems is a discovery process. This is the adventurer out into unknown worlds. My mother had a saying, there's always another road to town. So my mother grew up, think high school kid. Let's just think about high school kid. That would have been the late 40s and the early 50s. So out in western Nebraska, small town, basically the same area that I grew up in, and she grew up out on a farm. And sometimes the road would wash out. There's always another road to town. Kind of passed from a practical aspect into legend and proverb. There's always another road to town. Your job as a leader is to find it, to discover what is out there. There's also something else about a leader in solving these problems is that you want to create an atmosphere of innovation in the people around you. You want to find a way to say yes. Well, that means you want to inspire the people around you to be innovative problem solvers that are good at it so that it's easy to say yes. The drive, the motivation, the energy, the ambition to solve problems, those are all things that as you express them in the work that you do, people learn from you. They copy you, and they are inspired to do that on their own. It's actually fun, or should be fun. You know, problem solving, doing the detective work to discover the solution, finding the other road to town. Those should be fun things. And everybody should want in on it, and they will copy and they will learn from you. Now, the third part of adapting is learning from mistakes. Learning from mistakes. No matter how much you improve, there will always be mistakes. The goal about mistakes is to never make the same one twice. It's a lot harder than you can imagine to never make the same mistake twice. The first time you want to notice. The second time, you're going to start to feel pain. A little more motivation to solve it. To never make the same mistake twice, you're going to have to notice when mistakes happen. That's a part of paying attention. You have to notice when mistakes are happening. And you have to make them rare by preventing them. We'll talk more about that. As a leader, one of the most important elements of learning from mistakes is to take the blame. Take the blame. It's your fault anyway. You're the leader. Remember I said you could not delegate accountability? So when there's a mistake, it's yours. You might have to share some of the accountability, but the people around you will respond. When you're the one who says, that was my fault, I set up the conditions under which this mistake would happen, and I'm working to solve that. There's an important element of this in terms of honesty and transparency. And again, in my more recent work experience, in that world of IT, data analysis, doing that stuff, I had a number of partners, some of them that were depending on me to provide solutions. And one of the things about having this kind of radical transparency to say, my fault, we missed it, we're doing what we can to fix it, is that people trust you. They really begin to trust you. And there will come a time when it's not your fault and it's their fault. And, it's not uncommon in business world that a problem blows up and everybody jumps up and points at the other guy and says, it was his fault. And it's this big contest to see who wins. And I've had that experience and have had to say, well, it really wasn't my fault. Let's look at what happened in this process. This process is broken. And I know of one particular instance where that was true. This process is broken. And I had one of the people that was my peers who was like a gunslinger of blaming others. Let's say, when a problem blew up, they were up fast, shooting the gun and firing blame everywhere. But because we had this relationship of this radical transparency, that blame belonged to that person and their team. And they stood right up and said, you know what, that was a mistake. We need to change this process so that we never do that again. And it wasn't like, yay, I win, I blame the other person, and they took it. It was, well, thank God we have an honest and open enough process and relationship with each other that we can fix the problem, learn from our mistakes in order to prevent them. Because that's the goal. It's like, don't make the same mistake twice. There's another element of this too. And there is a proximate cause and a root cause. And you need to be able to tell the difference. And that is finding out the real cause. And this is careful detective work, because you got to dig down into that thing, or you will mistake this. You will mistake a proximate cause for a root cause, and the problem will happen again. Now, this is difficult for me to fully explain this. So I'll give you some examples that have to come from the microprocessor development process. There was a time in the way back where I was involved in the manufacturing of microprocessor chips. And we had this one very particular complex 300,000 transistor chip for laptop videos. Mostly digital, some analog. I mean, the complexity is enormous. And you would do a design, manufacture a design, take it to test and see whether it worked or not. The process of microprocessor manufacturing is iterative. You iterate through these things. And they would look at the design, look at the issues, and come up with a solution, redesign it, and then build another set. Now, this took a long time to do this sort of thing. And it was in that process I felt these people are doing a bad job, because they kept fixing the proximate cause. And to me, it was like I'm looking at a deck of cards, and they would say, I found the problem, and it would be the top card on the deck. Fixed it. And then they would go, oh, wait, nope, there's another problem. on the next iteration. And we just go through chip version after chip version, right? And when you make a chip, it's number A, number B, number C. And in the world of developing complex microprocessors, you shouldn't get to M or R or S or T, but we would. We would do that. And what I noticed was they kept dealing with the proximate causes of the issues and not digging down into the root. What is the root of this problem? So I offer that as a kind of thing is don't settle for the first thing that pops up, but make sure that you've really fully embraced the analysis to get to the root of it. It reminds me now, I watch a lot of detective shows on TV, and the first person that they say, your first suspect, it's never that person. That person has an alibi. It's never the second suspect either. They have an alibi. You have to keep digging and digging. So when you're dealing in business, remember, it's not the first suspect that you need to arrest. There is, in Philippians, one of my favorite passages from Paul. Forgetting what is behind, I press on. Forgetting what is behind, I press on. That's Philippians 3:13. And that is in problem solving and coordinating and leadership, that is a rule you want to live by. Forget what is behind and press on. Because it's not about blaming others or blaming circumstances or blaming, being bitter and resentful. It's about always keeping in mind where you're headed. That's true of the Christian life. That's true of the work you do in business. That's true of being a leader. You're looking forward. I always tell the story. I watched the movie Cannonball Run. It's like way back in history in the arcade. You probably have never seen it. Famous people like Burt Reynolds were in it, and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. And Dean Martin was a driver. Dean Martin, he has an Italian background, you may know. And he jumps into a Ferrari for this race, and I think Sammy Davis Jr. is with him. And he's sitting at the car at the beginning. Cannonball Run is a race across the country, breaking all the speeding laws. And he talked to his partner in the Ferrari. The top was down. It's a beautiful car, red as appropriate. And he said, the first rule of Italian race car driving, and he reached up and he grabbed the rearview mirror and ripped it off the windshield and threw it behind him. The first rule of Italian race car driving is what is behind you does not matter. I love that, right? Paul, forgetting what is behind, I press on. Final thing I will leave you with in the context of this whole lesson, especially as it regards to learning from mistakes, is that the person who makes no mistakes does nothing. So that's the end of our session today. Thank you for your time. Next time we will be talking about leadership and communication, what makes them successful, what the channels are, how to evaluate them, what the hindrances are. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you, Jesse, and all the AV team for your support. Thanks to Katie and Debbie, who worked on all the administration, helping me with that. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time.